Most indie films never get made, and I honestly don't think it's because the scripts are bad. I mean, a lot of them are, but that's not the main reason. They wait for more money. They wait for the perfect actor. They wait for a producer to come save them. They wait for Telefilm or a grant or a studio or an agent or some magical person from the industry to show up and say, hey, great news. We believe in you. Here's the money. Go make your movie. And I get it, because I did the same thing. Before I made my first feature film, Remnant, I tried all the traditional routes. Telefilm, CMF, Creative BC, all the places you're supposed to apply. I tried to get traction through my agents. I tried to set the movie up through the system. And you know what happened? Nothing. And it wasn't because the script wasn't working. It wasn't because the movie didn't have potential. It was because I hadn't directed a feature before. And when you haven't directed a feature before, a lot of people basically look at you and say, come back after you've already done the thing that we won't help you do. You can't get the opportunity because you don't have the credit. And you can't get the credit because no one will give you the opportunity. So at a certain point, I had to be honest with myself. If I don't make this happen myself, this movie is never going to happen. And that's what this video is about. So why do most indie films never get made? Here are the biggest reasons I've seen. Number one, the script isn't packaged as a movie. On Remnant, I knew we had a strong script because it started attracting really talented department heads. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. Investors are not just investing in pages. They want to know, who are you? Why are you the person to make this? Who's on your team? What experience do they have? What genre is this? Who's the audience? What does it cost? Why does this movie make sense in this marketplace? How are you going to attract the cast? How are you going to actually make it? And maybe most importantly, how are you going to protect their money? A lot of filmmakers think once people read the script, they'll get it. Maybe, but maybe they won't even read it because people are busy. Investors are busy. Before someone reads the script, they need to understand the opportunity. That's what packaging is. You're not just saying, here's a story I love. You're saying, here's a movie that can actually exist. And that package changes depending on the genre. If you're making a horror, you can always get away with lesser known actors because horror generally has a broad audience. The concept, the poster, the hook, the scares, those things can carry a lot of weight. But if you're making a thriller or a drama or certain international facing movies, name talent may matter a lot more. So you have to understand what you're making. And even if you can't get name talent at the start, you should at least have a plan for it. Maybe you build money into the above the line budget for a recognizable actor. Maybe you design one role that can be shot out in fewer days but still gives the movie value. But you need to think about this before you sit down with investors. Because the worst thing you can do is raise money and then realize, oh, you know what? We actually need more money because we forgot the thing that makes this movie financeable. That kills trust. And in indie film, trust is everything. Number two, the budget doesn't match the concept. This is one of the biggest reasons indie films die. The filmmaker writes a movie they cannot afford to shoot. And I don't mean the movie is ambitious. Ambition is good. I mean the concept and the budget are living in two completely different realities. If you're making a sci-fi space opera and your budget is under $2 million, then one of two things is probably true. Either you have no idea what your movie actually costs, or you're a wizard with VFX and you know how to pull off impossible things for almost nothing. And maybe you are. Maybe you're like the Daniels or David Sandberg or Kane Parsons, and you've figured out how to do a lot with no money at all. But most people have not. This is why horror is such a powerful genre for indie filmmakers. Not because horror is easy, and trust me, it's not, but horror can create a huge emotional experience with limited resources. One house, a small cast, a strong concept, practical effects and sound design and tension and atmosphere, maybe a monster we barely see, one disturbing image that sticks in your head, that can go a long way. But even in horror, the budget has to match the script. And if your movie has too many locations, too many characters, too many night shoots, too many stunts, too many effects, too many company moves, too many complicated scenes, that all costs money. And if your budget doesn't reflect that, you're not being scrappy, you're being dangerous. Before you go to investors, get experienced people to stress test your plan. Have an experienced first AD look at your schedule. Have an experienced line producer look at your budget. Because if you think you can shoot your movie in 15 days, but an experienced AD says, no, this is 25, that is not a small difference. That is a completely different movie. And now you have two choices: raise more money or change the script. And what you should not do is ignore the problem and hope it magically works out on set. Because it won't. Set is where bad math becomes chaos, and chaos costs money. Number three, can't explain the business case. I never want to tell someone not to make their movie they're passionate about making. That's not what I'm saying. But if you're asking other people to invest real money into your movie, you need to understand what you're asking them to participate in. You're not just asking them to support your dream. You're asking them to take a risk. And if you're asking them to take a risk, you need to be able to explain the business case. Who is this movie for? Why does the genre make sense? What are the comps? What does success look like? How does this movie have a path to being sold, distributed, or seen? I'm a genre filmmaker. I want to make movies that are seen by millions of people around the world. So for me, horror makes sense. It travels, it has a passionate audience, it can be made at lower budgets, it can be marketed with a strong hook, it has a clear business case than a lot of other genres. But if you want to make a small niche art house drama, that is totally valid. Just make sure the budget reflects that. If your movie is a $250,000 art house drama and the path to recoupment is realistic, great. Go make it. But if you're spending $5 million on a niche drama with no-name actors and no clear audience, that's a very hard business case to defend. And if investors lose money because the filmmaker refused to be realistic, that can burn the relationship forever. Now, there are exceptions. But if you're funded by soft money, for example, grants, government funds, money that does not require the same private recoupment pressure, then the equation changes. If Telefilm gives you money to make a bold art film, that's amazing. Make the art film. But if you're raising private equity, you have a responsibility to think about that return. And that does not mean making soulless movies. It means understanding the relationship between budget, audience, genre, and risk. That's part of the job. Number 4, misunderstanding what investors actually fund. A lot of filmmakers think investors fund passion. They don't. They fund trust. They fund clarity. They fund leverage. They fund execution. Passion matters, but passion is not enough. Every filmmaker is passionate. What matters is whether the investor believes you can actually get the movie made. And that trust is not built in one meeting. In general, and this was totally true for me, the average time between meeting an investor and actually closing the deal is around 6 months. That's 6 months of meetings, phone calls, follow-ups, questions, paperwork, budget revisions, deal points, legal fees. And during that whole process, you're not just raising money, you're building trust. You're proving that you understand the responsibility. You're proving that when they ask a question, you can answer it. And when you don't know the answer, you can go find it. That's what investors are watching. They're evaluating you. Are you calm under pressure? Are you organized? Are you transparent? Are you realistic? Do you know where the money is going? Do you understand the risks? Do you have the right people around you? Can you actually execute? Because once the money comes in, the relationship doesn't end. It gets more serious. Now you have to keep them updated. You have to maintain trust. You have to make sure they feel respected, because if this movie works, you don't want it to be a one-time transaction. You want to make the next one. That's how you build a career outside the system. Not by finding one person to write one check, but by proving that you can be trusted with capital. Number 5, the filmmaker is waiting for permission. I know I already touched on this, but this is a big one, and it's the hardest one to admit. A lot of filmmakers are not actually waiting for money. They're waiting for permission. Permission from a funding body, permission from an agent, permission from a producer, permission from a studio, permission from the industry, permission from someone who feels more legitimate than they do. And I'm not saying those paths are bad. They're not. Grants can be great, agents can be great, and producers can be great. But if your entire plan depends on someone else choosing you, then you've put your future in someone else's hands. And no one cares more about your dreams than you do. That sounds harsh, but it's also freeing. Because once you accept that, you stop waiting. You start building. You start reaching out to people. Dozens of people. Hundreds of people. You start asking practical questions. What do I have? Who do I know? What can I make? What can I afford? What version of this movie is possible right now? That's the shift. The movie stops being this perfect imaginary thing in your head and it becomes a real problem to solve. And that's what filmmaking is. It's problem solving every day at every level. Budgeting is problem solving, so is writing and casting and fundraising and directing and post-production and marketing. It's all problem solving. So if you're waiting for the version of your movie that has no problems, you're waiting for a movie that doesn't exist. The job is not to avoid problems. The job is to solve them. So why do most indie films never get made? Because the filmmaker is not willing to change the plan. They're attached to the fantasy version, the perfect budget, the perfect cast, the perfect schedule, the perfect funding source, the perfect moment. Movies do not get made in perfect conditions. They get made because someone decides, this is hard, this is messy, this is risky, but I'm going to find a way through it. That does not mean being reckless. It does not mean ignoring the numbers or lying to investors. It does not mean pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. It means taking responsibility. It means adapting the script to the budget, building the right team, understanding the business case, being honest about the market and protecting investor trust, using the resources you actually have instead of mourning the resources you wish you had, and betting on yourself before anyone else does. That was the shift for me. Once I stopped waiting for someone to give me permission, the whole process changed. It did not become easy. It became possible. And that's what this channel is really about. Not the fantasy version of filmmaking, the real version. How you get a movie made when nobody is coming to save you. How you think like a filmmaker, but also like a founder. How you build something outside the system instead of spending your time and your life waiting to be let in. So if you're sitting on a script right now and it feels stuck, ask yourself one honest question. Am I waiting for permission or am I building a plan? Because those are very different things. So if you're interested in making films outside the system, raising money, building packages, working with investors, and actually getting your movie across the finish line, subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be breaking down everything I learned making my first feature, Remnant, and everything I wish someone had told me before I started. And if you're trying to make your own film, I also have a newsletter and a work with me link below. But the main thing I want you to take away from this video is your movie is probably not dead, but the version of the movie you're clinging on to might be. And sometimes letting that version die is the only way the real movie gets made.